All right. Welcome to Seward Sound Words, local writers reading their work live on the air here on 91.7 KIBH FM Seward and on our YouTube channel at Sacktown. We're back with another show, 2 shows in 2 weeks. I am excited about that. And I'm really excited to have our guest today. Brian Wright is in the studio at the station. He published debut novel very recently, and he's going to read from that today. So good to have you, Brian. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. We've shared the racquetball court together
We have
a couple times, and that's been really fun.
Didn't we go down to 3 games? And
we are evenly matched.
Very evenly matched. It was a good time.
And here we are, in the studio. Sound a big part of both arenas. I want to say with the ricochet of the ball.
Sure.
And of course, working together. Yes, battles, but really, I love about racquetball like. You combine like those great rallies, right? That we're both involved in that go on and just like get your heart going. You're out of breath. It's like, wow, we just did that.
Absolutely.
So something like that's going to happen here today, but the heart rate's going to be fine. And
mine's up just a little bit
good,
I admit, right now.
Racquetball level.
But there's definitely times in those games where even if I'd lose the rally, I'd come out smiling.
Oh yeah,
it's a lot of fun.
Totally. It's going to be hard to stay away from it this winter. We'll see how that goes. I have a feeling both of us will be back in there. Yeah. So we got to know each other a lot more there, but we also know each other as just members of the community, parents, and I knew of you as yet another talented writer who'd been working on a book project and now has published a book. So Seward just like keeps coming with more work, more entertainment, more books, which I'm really excited about. I think it's a really special thing about our town.
I'm amazed that in such a small town we have so many talented writers and talented people in general. Honestly, it's amazing.
Yeah,
it's a great place.
They flock here to Seward, which is where we are recording, Seward, Alaska. I for several reasons, I think is luck, but even just the seasonal, art. Alaska inspires art. The schedule, time, I always say, is like the common denominator to do this, to put out a book. You need time, and yet you work at Seaview quite a bit, but find the time to kind of get the creative projects as many people do here. And
yeah, I think winter helps with that because we have to sort of retreat indoors for a large portion of the day, and it gives us writers time to sit behind the computer and hammer out some words.
Absolutely, yes, well put. So I do want to say congratulations off the bat here regarding your novel, The Sword of Ishel.
That's correct. Yeah, and thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. Big deal. All right. So I know you got some excerpts to read, and I'm excited to hear those. But even just hearing the title, I think that kind of leads into a discussion of The Sword of Ishel. Like, what do we got here? What kind of book are we dealing with? What's the backstory?
Yeah. So I've always loved fantasy writing and fantasy novels ever since probably reading The Lord of the Rings when I was, younger. But I was looking for a fantasy story that took place in maybe a different setting than people were used to. And I've been brainstorming, I guess, on what that could be. And then my wife and I took a trip to Belize. And we, just because there's so many of them in the area, we visited several sort of ancient Mayan archaeological sites. And I came away from that trip very interested in their culture and felt like it could make a great setting for a fantasy novel. And sorcery and magic and gods were part of their culture. So it seemed like it really lent itself potentially to this type of story, though I could not find a lot of stories that existed that used them as a setting. So that's where it came about. And
nice.
The rough draft I ended up writing in about 3 weeks.
What?
Which was unbelievable. It was like pouring out of me. And,
nice.
And I was like, oh, this is going to go fast.
It did.
But I think one day I wrote 11,000 words, which was an absolute record for me.
That's amazing. You can do that. You did that.
I did one day.
Wow.
Something like 40 pages, I think.
How did you feel after that?
I just couldn't stop. Right. Honestly, I think I wrote from right when I woke up until like 11 p.m. And it was just coming out. Couldn't stop it.
Why even stop at that point?
And then,
dude, that is a gift. You if you did that one day, you can do that again.
Yeah, for sure. usually I try to set a goal of writing about when I'm in rough draft mode.
Right. Yeah.
I try to write 1,000 words a day.
Yeah.
That's my goal.
Yep.
And some days it is an absolute battle.
Oh yeah.
Like you get to 500 and you're forcing it.
They're terrible. Yeah.
You feel like it's terrible. It might not be as bad as you think it is.
Definitely. Yeah.
But then there's days like that where you just can't stop the flood. And, that's how the whole rough draft went. But then the editing process was not so smooth, I guess. That has taken about 7 years.
Wow.
3 weeks for the rough draft, 7 years for editing to the point where I felt like it was ready.
And let's clarify, because I don't see you sitting down from sun up to sundown editing for 7 years.
No.
This is the lag time is just not working on it.
There was long stretches at times where I didn't even touch it.
Right.
Maybe even 7 or 8 months at a time. Sometimes
it's not even in your head, because
there was a lot of other things going on in life. Yeah. We moved to a new town. We, bought 2 different houses. We had a daughter. Yeah. Had other regular jobs.
Right.
So
sort of shell is locked away. It's not.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I did try to pursue what people call the traditional publishing avenue, which in the literary world means you have to get an agent.
Yeah.
And then this is if you want to get published by one of the big publishers. They call them the Big 5.
Okay.
You cannot submit directly to those publishers. They will only take submissions that have an agent.
Right.
So you do this process called querying.
Yeah, done it.
Send a query letter that's about 2 paragraphs. That somehow is your pitch.
Right.
That your book is good and unique and worth them investing their time and money in.
Yeah.
And it's very challenging. From what I understand, they only accept about 1 in maybe 10,000 submissions.
Right. And how many of those are even based on what the pitch letter says? It could be a name goes in this pile. But like from your setup for this book, I think you got a unique, kind of like, ooh, this could go in a pile that's going to be looked at again. The Mayan influence and this idea of like fantasy in a new place, like just getting to that 11,000 in one day, and how this book came to be. Like your antenna's up, you want to write a fantasy novel,
right?
Where am I going to set it? You're looking around, you're ready for something to speak to you, like, oh, this is where you go to Belize, and boom, here we go. The sensors start going off. This is working. Yep, love this. I'm into this. This is exciting. I am finding things right now. I want to research more. The puzzle is starting to fit together as far as like, I got a book here, and then you did some research, I assume, came back from Belize with a lot of info to go at.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then in the meantime, now I'm sure you had a lot of ideas even before Belize of like what kind of things you're going to do in this novel, even not having a setting, maybe characters yet. And the things can just start lining up. And I could see you getting to these type of fast writing days where you're just like ready to go and the puzzle fits, like, and I don't know. I think I like that as a pitch letter. The agent thing I know is extremely difficult. So you tested those waters.
Yeah. I think I submitted to about 70 or 80 agents.
Really went out to sail.
In the fantasy world is pretty much all of the reputable ones.
Yeah.
And usually you hear nothing back at all.
Yeah.
Or occasionally you'll get like a form letter that just says like, we're sorry, fill in the blank your name, but we have not accepted your book at this time or whatever. So, but going to Belize in person was crucial because some of the scenes actually take place in places where I was.
Yeah.
So when I was describing them in the story, I had this very, specific place in mind that I was writing about.
That's a good place to be. That's fun.
For example, there is a really interesting sacred cave in Belize. It's called the ATM cave, and that's an acronym for something I can't pronounce.
Right.
There's a lot of words in my book that I'm actually not sure how to pronounce.
Right.
Because they're written in ancient Mayan.
Cool. And, get the spelling right.
I get the spelling right, and I'm not actually sure how to say it. People's names. Anyway.
Yeah.
So this cave is a place where they would take sacrifice victims, you could say. Victims. Yeah. And absolutely beautiful cave. Even if it were not for the cultural intrigue, it would be an incredible place to visit. You have to swim to get into it, and then you go in there, and it's full of pottery, because I guess one form of sacrifice was actually to sacrifice your hard work. So you would take this, pot that you spent this time building and firing and decorating, and you would smash it, give it to the gods to like, here's my hard work. Help us with some rain for our farming or something like that.
Yeah.
But
let's try that first before the other sacrifice. Like, here, take my hard work. I'll keep doing some hard work here on the ground. Yeah.
So say the drought or the or whatever continued, they would up the game for the sacrifice, and then they would bring in human sacrifice.
Yeah.
Which is not something, sort of a misconception is that the Mayans were big on human sacrifice. It was actually not. They weren't prevalent sacrificers, I guess.
Yeah, last resort kind
of.
The
Aztecs were more kind of the way Mel Gibson portrayed the Mayans in Apocalypto, I think was the name of that movie, where he had them just like sacrificing people in a line, one after the other.
Right.
And that just was not actually the case for the Mayans, but they did do it. And this cave was just unbelievable to imagine being that person that was about to be sacrificed. Like, I had this moment inside that cave where I was imagining that, and it was powerful, frightening, and just, I don't know, it was part of the inspiration that went into this.
Yeah, that's where writing comes in, where you're like, okay, this is something I could spend a lot of time thinking about and writing about, and
right. So anyway, that was the inception of the whole process.
Cool.
But
I love writing about a place when I'm not there. Like, even my Seward stuff, like I wrote in Delaware a lot, and it just took me back to Seward, and just to like, and I'm sure Belize was wonderful to keep going back to here and in the pages.
Right.
That's just like, I don't know. I think that's like a good place to be as a writer, like kind of the details after you've experienced it, and now you kind of yearn for it, and your memories and what you can build, it just like shines even more, when you're away from it,
I've actually wondered how inaccurate my memory is. Like when I was describing that cave, I wonder if I went back, I'd be like, oh, I had that detail completely wrong.
Yeah. But
our memories are gray.
Right. Definitely. As parents, for sure. But it comes from an authentic place, which is important as a writer. You can kind of believe in it and trust it. And then that really helps with getting it down and the editing. Like, I'm keeping it down like that, so. Sure. The cave scene, they got to be good. Love to go in there in the book. What an advantage to. I mean, I'm gonna read the book, so I will go there. But as far as today,
and then I also wanted to like do justice to their culture. So I spent quite a bit of time reading about their gods and their myths and their creation myth, and I wanted to. I guess I've since learned that some of it I was not spot on with accuracy, and I feel disappointed that I missed a couple of details. But I wanted to do it, better than it's sometimes been portrayed. Like I already mentioned Apocalypto, but that movie's kind of a nightmare in terms of its accuracy. And I wanted to do a little better, if I'm gonna, because there are Mayans alive today. And I would like if one of them picked up the novel, that they wouldn't just be very disappointed in how I treated their culture.
I mean, that's the dream probably as you're writing this, like, a Mayan, will read this, or someone with Mayan ancestry or expert connected and be like, that's a good book.
Right.
Nice work.
I
Close enough. Thank you.
I imagine there'd be some things where they'd be like, oh, you missed this, or.
I think there'd be a lot more, gratitude for like, thank you for spending all this time to kind of, shed a light on our culture. And I mean, that must have been fun doing the research, right? As far as absorbing and like very interested, filling the curiosity. And
definitely. I mean, absolutely fascinating people. They were highly advanced in a lot of ways. I think they're one of the only times in history that an alphabet has been developed.
Okay.
Because really, it's only 2 or 3 different times has an actual alphabet developed, but then it branches off into a bunch of different languages. They also had very advanced number systems. Knowledge of astronomy was kind of off the charts, especially compared with European cultures that existed at the same time. in a lot of ways, they were as advanced or more advanced than some of those cultures that existed on the other side of the world, even though they had no contact yet at that point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the race was on across the globe to kind of figure things out.
Huge cities. One of the cities that we visited is called Karakol, and I had to write it into the novel. It's one of the main 4 cities that end up being a part of the book.
Yeah.
And they think that it had 150,000 people in it.
Wow.
Like there was actually more people living in that part of the world then than there are now.
Wow. All right. I need a little more context on like Mayan. So you say 150,000 people. Give me like a date around when that's occurring.
Yeah.
Ballpark.
So we're talking probably
Way
around
back.
400 to 600 AD.
Okay. And
that was kind of the height. They call that the classical period of the Mayan culture.
Okay.
And there were several very big cities like Tikal, which is in modern day Guatemala.
Yep.
Karakol is just over the border in Belize. And then another city is called Calakmul, and it's also in Guatemala, I believe. And those 3 were kind of the big players in the sort of what they call the lowlands of the Mayan kingdom. It was not a singular kingdom. That's another thing people get wrong. It wasn't like the Romans where they had kind of one culture underneath. It was really a series. Like each city was almost its own. It was like a nation state, basically, or like a city state, I guess would be the better term. So they were not one unified culture.
Cool.
But and they were always fighting.
Okay.
There's a lot of fighting.
Not unified. Yeah. So Belize, Guatemala, major countries where there was Mayan existence.
Mexico, like Campeche area, and Chichen Itza is another city. But they were a little bit later. So there was something called the, I think it's the classical Mayan collapse.
Okay.
And all these big cities were abandoned. And to this day, we really don't know why.
Huh.
We don't know if it was wars, potentially climate change, overpopulation, drought. But sometime around 800 AD, most of these cities were just completely abandoned.
Wow. But there's like
mostly abandoned.
There's known history but prior about kind of what's going on. But as far as the collapse.
And they know this because, they carved, like I said, they had detailed alphabets.
Right.
And we actually know how to read their dating system. And we can correlate exact dates from their calendar to ours. And we know they would chisel in, like whenever someone became a king or whatever, they would almost for sure want their name and like the dates carved into stone.
Yeah.
And there's all these carvings, and all of a sudden they just stop.
Okay.
And it's across multiple cities at almost the exact same time, like within 100 years. They just stop.
The big Mayan collapse mystery.
Yeah. And there's a lot of theories, but nobody totally knows why.
Does Sword of Eshel take a theory on that?
The sequel does, which I'm in the process of drafting. It's been a much slower draft.
Yeah, there's 10,000 word day around the corner for you.
Man, I had a 5,000 word day not too long ago, and then the next day I got 300, and that was the most I could.
Sounds right. Yeah. Good effort. Sit down once more.
300. That's like one page.
Yeah,
I got one page in.
Dude, yeah, I remember being on the 1,000 a day kind of diet and just like hungry for it, like just need it, and it was hard. And I remember like some 5,000 word weeks, Monday through Friday,
right?
That were a struggle. And I was like, this is all crap. But it was 5,000 words. And it's a huge deal to stay at it with the discipline and move it along. And I'm into this these days because I've had some of these. I get back into writing with the fall, just like get those bad days out of the way. Like sit and try to write a little bit, sit with them. Don't totally avoid the writing day, because then you could go into these just, all right, I'm just away from it, and it goes in the drawer. But I've been finding and just believing, trusting, if I just sit and write through those days, I don't need to sit all day. I'm not going 1,000, I'm not going 10,000 certainly, but just give it a shot, move it along, and then go about the day. And then, the break's going to come, relative floods. I'm not saying everybody's going to go write 10,000 words. I think that is a gift kind of thing,
that was
which is really cool, and a 5,000 recently. So you can go big. But just like these days, you'd be like, yeah, this is good. You know, this is,
Yeah.
I'm on, you know, and this is, those crap days are a big part, I think, for me. And so, yeah.
No, I agree. And one thing when I'm in the drafting phase, and it was easier before I had a kid.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
But I would set that goal of 1,000 words a day. And even if it was an absolute battle, I would really try not to stop until I hit 1,000, even if it was just brutal.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you go back and when you reread it, the stuff you thought was great feels disappointing, and then the stuff you thought was terrible ends up being better than you thought.
The perspective does change. It's true.
So I don't know, just setting that goal, and I would always like have a physical calendar, and I would write how many words I wrote each day.
Yeah.
So it was staring me in the face. So if I only got 300 words, I'd be like, ooh, I got to make that up tomorrow.
Right.
And I'd try to write 1,700 words to make up for what I didn't write the day before.
So you'd kind of like the week would count, or you're just kind of relative days around.
Yeah. But if I went over, I wouldn't give myself a break the next day.
Nice.
I'd still try to hit 1,000.
So you're disciplined. Yeah.
And if you do that, because this novel's about 100,000 words,
which is kind of a novel length. You know, it's good. It's like kind of chunky.
300-page novel, like a basically standard length novel.
Just above. Yeah.
If you do that, you can write the rough draft in about 3 months.
Right.
3.5 months.
Right.
And that's amazing because once you have the rough draft, I mean, editing is a battle.
Right.
But once you have the words there, you have something to work with.
Oh, yeah.
And then I have this whole process with editing that is the way, because this is not my first attempt at a novel.
Yeah.
And I've come up with a system for editing that seems to work.
Cool. We'll get into that in a little bit. I'd like to hear about that. I mean, I love the rough draft system. That works.
Yeah. It's my process. And what I've learned from talking with other writers is everyone has their own strategy.
Right.
And in my opinion, there's absolutely no better way. It's just whatever works for you.
Totally. Yeah.
Some people are like, oh, no, I don't do any pre-planning.
Yeah.
I like to, just start writing. And I feel like it comes more spontaneous if I don't have a plan. And then there's people like me that like to have a pretty detailed outline.
That's going to help you get to the 1,000 every day. I think.
Totally. Yeah. It keeps me like making it to where there's connections. Like some of this comes in editing, but you can kind of foreshadow if you know where it's going.
Right. Totally.
Things like that.
Yep.
So,
I mean, it's so much nicer to sit down to a new day of writing with like an idea of what you're going to be working on today.
Sure.
Like even and as specific as you can get. Okay, this scene and this has to happen. The day is going to go better, I find, for me.
Absolutely.
But you're right. No, every writer is different, and I do find it so wonderful to hear about different styles and different processes because you can try. You can try out a new thing, like what worked for you before. Oh, let me do a little what Brian's doing, where I'm writing down my words every day, and that's going to look good, and that's going to keep me to it. And I just do that, and I can get, I want a novel. What's it going to take? I'm willing to suffer and do whatever, Right. So that 1,000 words a day, that's nice. I mean, I respect that to just stay sitting too. I would definitely get up, even leave the house. Like it's tough to get back after the morning and like, all right, I'm going to sit again. Sometimes I would though if I really needed more words, but like I go play disc golf or take a walk. But you're in there, maybe
I think that can be great. Like take a break for sure if you're stuck.
Yeah.
Or one thing that really helps me, and it's can be obnoxious too, but sometimes I would write by hand.
Yeah.
Like I would pull out a pen and paper and go sit outside.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, moving myself into a different setting, the creative juices would start to flow again.
For sure.
The thing that's obnoxious about is then you have to type it.
Yeah.
So you always have to write those words again.
Yeah, but that's some editing already going in.
Sure.
You do.
Yeah.
Sure. I love to write the planning on the pad. I have an idea. Like this morning, I got lucky. And I just like got to the pad and I just, 10 minutes of just like, oh yeah, I finally got something. They're really going to hang my hat on this for the week.
Yeah.
But it was fast. It's like, boom, there it is, and now going to the desk with it, even I did today was great. And I'm just excited. I got a little left there. I know where to go re-enter it and I'm just like in a good spot, but this week was a struggle to get to that.
Oh man.
A little flood for me today.
I think I found with fiction writing, if I'm stuck, it's usually because I'm trying to do something that is not working for the novel. Like I'm having the character do something that doesn't match. That's not the character.
Yeah.
Or there's something about the plot that it's probably going to end up being cut because it's it's not working.
Yeah. So the
Like-
sooner you notice that, it's going to save some time.
Yeah.
Because what you'll do there, rather than like just, well, I'll just do it anyway, you kind of take a turn and,
Yeah.
go
Like
down.
sometimes, like you were saying, it's good to step away.
Right.
Hey, I'm going to go for a run.
Right.
Or whatever.
Sort this
And
out a
then
little, get another
it
look
comes
at
out
it.
in your head. You're like, oh, I know why this is a struggle. This scene's just not working.
Yeah.
So what can I do to make it better?
Yeah.
And like we were talking about before the show, running, which is something I think we're both into,
Yeah.
is a great, because I retreat inside my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think because it hurts my body so much.
Yeah. Right.
So I retreat inside my mind and I get all this great thinking done, and I'll start having ideas for, my project, my writing project.
Yeah.
And I almost want to carry a little notebook with me so I can jot some of them out. But
Yeah.
I get home after a run. I'm like, ooh, I got to pull out my computer.
Yeah.
Because I had this idea. And
Yeah.
then bam, all of a sudden, 1,000 words that was a struggle before just spill out.
Right. The run.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. Running is key. That run state of mind, you can't do it without running,
And it can be a lot of things for because not everyone's into running.
Right.
I get it.
Right.
But could be disc golf or
Yeah.
fishing or whatever.
Right. Just
Kayaking, something like that.
having fun, or doing some, physical health. I think we're talking outdoors big. But I like this point about, figuring out that that's wrong. Like it's like, I'm going to, that can be an exciting thought for a writer where you're like, okay, I figured it out. I need to stop going in that direction and go this. All right. There's a break.
Right.
You feel a little crappy about, I wasted some time, but it's a breakthrough. And now you feel like you're getting on the path again.
Yeah. I think that if you're writing any project, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, something of this length, you have to be willing to sever off big pieces sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I think there's not as much with this novel, I guess, but there's been times where I've had to drop entire chapters that I'd written in a rough draft or just completely rewrite them.
Right.
Like there's definitely a lot of rewriting for me usually when I get past the rough draft. And, I'll hit a chapter and be like, okay, this isn't working. I need to rewrite this entirely.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I put hours into this rough draft, but you have to cut it.
Yeah. The better you are at that, I think you
can't get too attached.
Right.
You can't try to force something that's just not there.
And again, all that wrong work had to be done, let's just believe that in order to find that it was wrong. And, it's still writing practice, and you still had days that you felt good about because you hit that 1,000 words and, you contributed to the whole healthy just state of being that writing can do that.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to hear from this book, The Sword of Ishel.
Yeah,
this is 91.7 KIBH FM Seward. We're live on the radio, which is really fun. It is a beautiful fall day in Seward, and we're on our YouTube channel at Sacktown. Brian Wright, local author with a debut novel, Sword of Ishel. Sounds like a Mayan expert to me. Very interesting stuff. And let's hear a little of the book.
All right. Well, I figured I'd start with the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
Start at the start.
Boom.
So I don't want to set the scene too much because the book sets the scene. But one thing I find interesting is I wrote this rough draft before I had a daughter.
Yeah.
And the book is largely about, it's about the Mayans and all this sort of sorcery or whatever, but it's actually really about a father and a daughter's relationship.
Wow.
And I didn't have a daughter, but then when I did, it became to mean a whole new thing for me.
Sure.
And it almost feels like I foresaw the fact that I was
a little sorcery happening there.
Sometimes, and I look at his relationship with his daughter, and I'm like, I can relate to this. And I didn't have any idea that was going to be a thing.
What a cool thing to have down, like a journal almost on like what you expect to be as a parent.
Yeah. And in the book, his daughter is kind of a teenager. Well, she is a teenager. She's 13.
Yeah.
So there's maybe some challenges about raising a teenager that I'll get to experience in, about 10 years.
Well, I already have some great questions. Let's go.
All right. So here we go. The day his wife was stolen would haunt Milan Apraxis until the moment of his death. It happened beneath a flawless sky, rare during the jungle rainy season. 6 days of unbroken storms abruptly ceased, and the clouds peeled apart to reveal perfect blue, horizon to horizon. Milan took a break from tilling to knead his aching neck as the sun poured over his maize field. Yields are down, the village lord said the day before. If things don't pick up, Milan, we'll need a sacrifice. Get back in the gods' favor. Milan mopped his brow with a frayed end of his pati and exhaled slowly. Zuna, he called his daughter. She glanced up from the hewn dirt and leaned on her mattock. Her lanky shadow spread across the ground between them. Not too close to the others. I understood you last time, she huffed. You're doing very well, he added, feebly. She grunted something inaudible and turned back to the work. Milan prayed in silence. Give life to these seeds, he pleaded the gods. Let them resurrect the holy maize. He listened as Zuna's mattock chopped moodily through the soil. And let my daughter's roots sink deep. Help her grow tall and strong, not bent and broken like me. It was this precise moment when a distant scream pierced the perfect day and jolted him from his fieldwork. Saren, his life and greatest love, was in trouble. To me, Zuna, he cried, casting aside his tools. Hurry! Milan seized his daughter's hand, and together they dashed for home as fast as Zuna's young legs allowed. Every terrible scenario swam through Milan's head as they ran. There were many demons, gods, and wicked men in the jungle whose attention they might draw. At last they crested the final hill and skidded to a halt with dust eddying around them. Below, two enormous men surrounded their cottage door, armor and spears glinting in that flawless sun. Who are they? Said Zuna, unable to hide the tremble in her voice. The two warriors were broad-chested. They packed the space beneath the cottage's thatched awning. Plates of brine-soaked armor hung across their broad chests. They had identical, dark teak skin knotted with muscle, and long, sleek hair as black as a grackle. Each held a jade spear in one hand and a shield painted with a coiled snake in the other. The emblem was well known, the Khan dynasty. Royal Guards, he answered, of Calakmul. Royal Guards were only found with royalty. He squeezed his daughter's hand. The gods will grant us courage, he said to her. Milan eyed the twin warriors as he and Zuna approached. Up close, they were huge, wider than Milan by half and a full head taller. Their faces were identically grim and emotionless. Milan placed his hand on Zuna's lower back and guided her between them into the cottage. A handsome, majestic woman occupied their family table with a cloud of warriors, twins of the two outside, hovering around her. Servant girls immediately attended her every comfort. Milan had never imagined so many people in their tiny space. Where's Saren? He demanded. What have you done with her? Milan Takan, she said, and swept to her feet. The richness of her attire juxtaposed harshly against the cottage background. A jaguar fur cloak spilled from her shoulders, hems and straps embossed with jades, opals, and silver. Gold rings decorated each knuckle. Milan recognized her at once. She was Tuniel Kimmai, famed sorceress and high priestess of Calakmul, one of the two greatest cities in the realm. Milan had despised and feared her from the moment they'd met all those years before. Do not worry about your wife, she said. She is quite safe. I insist to see her. Or what? Said Tuniel. Her dark eyes thinned to poisonous slits. Milan couldn't stand to look at them. She thrummed with power, and he was no match for it. Nothing, my lady, he growled, and slumped into a defeated bow. He gestured for Zuna to do the same. As I expected, Milan Takan. It's just Milan, Kinmai. His back cracked painfully as he straightened upright. I vacated those titles long ago. She smiled hollowly. No need to be coy, Milan. We both know all about your past. Zuna's head tilted his direction, and Milan attempted to catch her eye. Tuniel must have noticed, for she appraised his daughter for the first time and grinned, exposing a full row of gem-studded teeth. The Calamte has heard rumors of your offspring. She brushed the back of her hand and its many rings over Zuna's cheek. Calamte now, is it? Said Molan, steering the conversation away from his daughter. Cobb Hicks has grown a spine. I wondered what the king of Tikal thinks of his rival's self-applied title. Insulting the high king of Calakmul in front of his priestess? Your famous runaway mouth continues to sow trouble for you, said Tuniel. She restored her too cunning smile. In a flash, she seized Zuna's chin and turned her face from side to side. Has your father ever told you he was once the prized pupil of Naranjo? Zuna glanced again at her father from the corner of her eyes. Speak, girl. No, mother, Zuna said meekly. A servant gasped. Mother was a formal address to an older woman, but inappropriate for the high priestess. A commoner could lose a head for such a blunder. Your father has no honor, no courage, so afraid of the god's judgment that he renounced his own lord, his own people, all to retire to this? She gestured at the dusty shack. Perhaps you could get on with whatever purpose you came for, interjected Molan. The village lord is threatening sacrifice if we don't meet crop quotas. I quite value my head. I need Zuna and Saren's help if I plan to keep it attached to my spine. Tuniel glowered at him for a moment, then nodded to one of her servants, who extended a folded swatch of red material. Molan accepted it tentatively. The Calamte's oldest son has been stolen. This token was left at the scene. After a pause, she added, only someone very powerful could have managed the crime. Molan unfolded the material and stared blankly at the woven symbol of a hawk encircled gold runes. The emblem of your dead king in Naranjo, said Tuniel. A sigil that has been banned for what, 15 years? I'm sure Cobb Hicks has others much smarter than me to figure out his little mystery, Molan responded. He folded the material and offered it back. You misunderstand things, Molan. Cobb Hicks has passed into the underworld. Khan Paktik is Calamte now. Sky Witness, Molan muttered, rendering the name into the commoner dialect. Sky Witness was just a young prince when his father and the lords of Calakmul sacked Molan's home city. Young, but already shrouded in infamy. Sky Witness believes you are most suited to answer this riddle. You're the only one left of the old dead Naranjo order, after all. Sky Witness is even more of a fool than people in the taverns whisper if he thinks I had something to do with this. I'm tired of your words, Molan, she said with a bored flick of her hand. Your choice is to follow his orders or watch pain fall on everyone around you. She stepped closer until their noses were almost touching. She smelled sweet like spices and cacao. Produce the Calamte's heir or your wife will suffer. That is Sky Witness's offer. Molan swallowed. For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the air. He wanted to resist, but he couldn't risk harm coming to Saren or Zuna or himself. Tell the boy king I'll do what I can, he growled in defeat. Tuniel grinned. I knew King Sky Witness could count on you. She nodded to her guards, and the troop filed neatly from the room, leaving only her sweet, lingering scent as evidence they'd been there at all.
Nice.
Whew.
Nicely done,
Thanks.
dude.
Gosh.
I like that.
Well, thanks.
Great stuff. Great language. Love the sentences. Really, I mean, I'm with you every step of the way.
I appreciate
Very,
that for sure.
Movie, you know, it's a cinematic. You know, I could just
Okay.
just a lot of, I don't know. Just I think that's a mark of good writing. Like I have the visual. It's very patient and there's tension right away. And I mean, I read that piece he wrote about paddling, and I was like, all right, this guy could write. And I do remember Seward City News. You know, you worked for them. You know, it's journalism. But this is sharp stuff.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I really appreciate
Nicely
that,
done.
Sean.
Yeah.
You know, it means a lot coming from you because I respect your writing so much. So that
thank you.
You know, hearing feedback from peers that's positive always is encouraging and helpful. For sure.
I mean, I don't need much, you know, and that was a full chapter, and that's good, great stuff. And I'm just so happy these books are out. You know, like this writing like that, you know, is so carefully done and so much goes into it, and care and just talent and skill. It should be out where people can read it, and it is. So
Yeah, it definitely, you know, I guess I'm definitely disappointed in a way that I was not able to get that traditional publishing
Right.
route or whatever. 'Cause,
Sure.
you know, we all have dreams when we go into this that we can have that bestseller.
Yeah.
But I just got to the point where I wanted it to be out. I put a lot of work into it, and so that was sort of why I chose to pursue self-publishing.
Yeah.
Because I wanted it. I would rather it be out in any form than just sit forever on the hard drive of my computer and
Right.
nobody ever read it.
Yeah. I mean, I view, you know, you get a book out, it's like, okay, now people have a chance, like this book catches on a little bit, or someone gets in the right hands, they're like, oh wow, like, and then you talk about a sequel. So that, you know,
Right.
around these query letters that aren't even getting a chance, you know, I really think the system is just hard.
Right.
So, you know, and now when people say, oh, you written a book, you say, yeah, Sword of Each Shell.
The Sword of Each Shell, it's out.
Here's how you get it
on Amazon.
Okay, yeah, great. So that's where because people are, you know, going to after that sample. So Amazon, your name, Sword of Each Shell.
Yes, it is available on Amazon as either an ebook or in paperback.
Cool.
It's also now for sale here in Seward at Dreamland Book and Yarn.
Awesome.
Michelle is a great supporter of arts in our community. She's the owner of the bookstore.
Yeah.
And an amazing person, and like I said, a huge supporter of local art and artists. And it's an honor that she's carrying the book in there, sitting next to yours, I think, on the shelf.
Awesome, nice. You could buy the combo. You need some winter reading. Awesome. Right? Yeah, Michelle, Michael done so much for the community in a lot of ways, and the writers. Yeah, spot on. I mean, we do a lot of readings at Res Art, and now we got Dreamland Books, where all these local books can be shelved and just displayed and purchased for those looking for seeing what Seward writers are up to.
Absolutely.
So honored to be beside you. Yeah, I really, let's hold that up. I do. It's a really nice job, you know, because when you go into self-publishing, now it's all you with the details. And as a photographer, a guy with an eye for things, that must have been nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it was helpful.
There we go.
Self-publishing, there are some options, I guess.
Yeah.
And you can buy covers.
Okay.
There's websites you go to, you find one that you like, and then you sort of buy it, and then you send the person who designed it your name and your title, and they just type that in or whatever. But it's quite expensive.
Sure.
It can be over $100.
Yeah.
For each a paperback and an ebook. So you'd have to buy it twice.
200. Basically.
Yeah. And you know, since you get a couple of dollars at best per book sale, you have to sell 100 or more just to pay for your cover.
Right.
So I attempted to do it myself, and it came out pretty good.
That's
I'm happy with.
That's your photo?
It's not my photo. It's actually a Creative Commons image that I found on the internet that you're allowed to.
Gotcha.
You know, anyone's allowed to use in whatever way.
Cool.
But the design I did myself.
Yeah, looks great, man.
Another thing, I don't know if you went this route or not, but Amazon, who I decided to self-publish with because they have a pretty user-friendly interface.
Kindle ebook?
Kindle Direct Publishing.
Yeah, that's same as mine. Yep.
Okay. But so when you go with them, they give you an ISBN.
Right.
But if you go different routes, you have to buy that.
Right.
And that's pretty expensive as well.
I recall that. Yeah. So that's nice package deal.
Yeah. So you can do it all, you know, essentially for free.
If
you have the skills with a graphic layout and things like that.
And like logistically, that was pretty smooth for you. Like, all right, I'm done. Smooth. Words are in, edited. Here we go. Let's make this.
And you just kind of upload it and you hit go.
Yeah. And you could always proof it and like take that upload down.
I did order a proof copy and went through that as well, and definitely found some stuff that needed to be fixed. I imagine there's still some typos. In fact, one friend said they found a couple.
Right.
But
they also said what they loved about the book, right?
She did.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and it was someone whose opinion about literary things I respect, because she's a very big reader and had some nice things to say about it. So that meant a lot.
Cool.
For sure.
Nice. Yeah. Good eye on things. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, there are a few errors
Good. Yeah, this is a real book, This
It is.
not...
I did not have an editor. I think editors can be super helpful because you get too close to your own
Yeah.
story, and sometimes it takes an outside opinion to help steer you right. But editors are also extremely expensive.
Yeah.
Like, to get a good one, you're talking probably a couple $1,000s.
For sure. Yeah.
That was just not.
Or
in
a
my
really
budget.
good friend.
And good friends are great.
Yeah.
I did have some feedback for sure
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
drafting process.
Yep.
So
yeah, the editor too, I think you're alluding to like big things shifting, character development, but even just on the sentence level, like you've looked at these words arranged this way so many times that you're just stuck in how you look at them, and they could just help with some wordsmithing where the same message comes across, but it's just like, hey, this is an awkward sentence, flow. I mean, nothing needed in that first chapter, man. That is efficient, that is moving, that is nice, and it's I'm interested in all the the gems and the setting. You're really good with the set design. I mean, you got a lot to work with here with all the Mayan backdrop, but the jaguar fur cloak and black as a grackle, and her smell there that's so strong with the casao and spices, and you kind of repeat that. Working.
Yeah, for some reason, this villain, because she does end up being one of the main villains, actually the main villain of the story, I would say.
Yeah.
Something about her like smelling nice. I
thought
was an
that's
interesting twist.
Totally.
I wanted to run with that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. It's that
cacao was considered almost like currency in the Mayan realm.
Oh, cool.
And it was typically something only the elite would have access to.
Gotcha. So that fits, but it also smells nice. Chocolate. Yeah.
And in their world, chocolate was not sweet. It was a bitter drink.
Right.
It took Europeans to start adding sugar to it, to sort of the chocolate we know.
Gotcha.
But it grows in their part of the world. Like when we were there, we saw some cacao trees with the pods.
Cool.
And I had never seen that before. It's pretty cool.
It was still like special, like chocolate is like a nice drink you're gonna have.
Oh,
but not sweet like the candy, like we're used to. Gotcha. Bitter.
Not
sure.
At all. It was a bitter drink. For sure.
And so the setup here, to prove I'm with you, this son of a king has been kidnapped.
Yes.
And they're accusing Milan, and I'm thinking isn't involved, but she still gives him there's no choice here. You're going to either get him, bring this kid back, or there's going to be pain on your whole family. She's put in this tough place. He's like, I'll do my best.
Exactly.
And now here we go into the book. Yeah. I mean, that's just a great setup. Like, thanks. I mean, I think this could do well, like with a fair chance with agents, with publishers, because you can, you're into it quickly. There's a real story, problem, the character, with his bent over back. He wants better for his daughter to grow tall. I don't know. I think you got a good elevator pitch. So who knows? Maybe this is a bit of a bridge to chances. If you want to get to that, going with any press, like Sam McDavid, most recent guest, we just want someone to like be like, yeah, someone who puts out books to be like, this is a good book. I believe in it. I want it. It doesn't need to be top 5. Doesn't mean to be top 5 million. Just somebody who's been doing this for a little bit. They're legit. And it's like, you wrote a great book. I want to make it for you. I mean, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, I guess from what I understand, and I've honestly let go of the traditional publishing, but once you self-publish, they pretty much will not touch it.
Okay. Like the sequel.
Like you make that choice.
With that particular book.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there are some exceptions to that. Like one author I like to point out when I talk about self-publishing is Hugh Howey.
Okay.
Who wrote a novel called Wool.
Good title.
And it's sort of a dystopian sci-fi, I guess.
Yeah.
Where these humans are living in an underground silo, and you don't know why. You just know that the air outside is so bad you can't go outside.
Yeah.
And it's more complicated than that. But he self-published it. I think serialized, so he was releasing like a chapter at a time or whatever,
episode.
And it got extremely popular.
Yeah,
and now the big publishers have it's now I think Netflix
TV show. It sounds like
or
a TV
whatever.
show. Yeah.
But they were like, we want this book, and he managed.
Everybody wants it, so now we want it. Yeah, if you can prove that.
He managed to work a system to where he retained exclusive rights to the digital, like the ebook.
Yeah,
and then they published the paperback. So
his self-published ebook he still got.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's a very rare case. But success for me in writing, my sort of vision of it has changed. And, I don't feel like you have to be a bestseller for it to be like, oh, it's a success.
Right,
it's just it's a fun process. I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I'm just glad it's out there.
You did the best you could. We did the best we could on this particular project over several years. It got your heart and soul and your flood to 11,000 word days, and you're just hard, nose to the grindstone editing, and here it is. It's the best I can make it, and I'm going to entertain people.
Yeah,
and
I hope so.
Yeah, you will.
I hope people that read it, really enjoy it.
Yeah.
So
I'm excited. That was a great sample. I do want to hear more. So I do want to revisit. We are here on 91.7 KIBH FM Seward. We're live with Brian Wright, debut author of The Sword of Ishel, Book 1, Broken Pyramids. I noticed the subtitle on there. We have alluded to a sequel earlier, but Broken Pyramids is nice. Some tension there. So the really interesting, this idea of how you wrote this, the central dynamic is a father and daughter, teenage daughter, sounds like. Then you wrote this prior to being a parent. Now you are a parent of a daughter who's not a teenager, but will be. You did the editing as a parent. So let's go through the editing, because where there was this great 3 months or less of boom, draft done, great, awesome, and then a lot of time off. And then what happened to kind of get the editing going? Because this is pretty recent, like the final editing. I'm sure there were steps with editing, but I remember talking to you back at Racquetball about, and you were just determined, you know what, I'm going to self-publish. I got a lot of work to do. I'm going to do it, and boom, on a mission. So take me to there. And then as you edit now as a parent, what changes? How was that? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I sort of alluded earlier to my process for editing.
Right.
And what I do is I start big picture. So my first edit through, I sort of once again revisit the whole book as a whole. And I call them draft cycles, because each time through, it's not like I just do another draft. It's more like sometimes I'll rework a whole chapter multiple times. And then, first edit through, I sort of go through the book again, beginning to end. And then the next time through, I get a little more focused, and I do each chapter separately, and really I'll even break them up so they're out of order, because I feel like sometimes that helps me see each chapter on its own.
Cool.
And I'll just focus on one chapter at a time, sort of trying to make that chapter work, even almost as if it was its own piece.
Yeah, short story.
And then after that, I'll break it up by paragraph. Nice. And I will scramble the paragraphs so that I'm looking at each. I'm really trying to do sentences at that point. I'm looking at each individual sentence and trying to figure out how it could work better. And then putting all back together. And at that point, I usually like to print it through one of the several companies that you can, basically publish, and then get a print version. And then I like to then do an edit with my pen on the page and circle this word and cross out that and write in some ideas in the margins. Any way to get myself to look at it differently.
Cool.
Because you do, like you sort of said earlier, you see something over and over again and you get stuck in sort of your rut. But if you pull yourself out of the way you've been looking at it, you see things a little bit different, and maybe see things that are working and things that aren't working.
Scramble the paragraphs.
Yeah,
that's cool.
It's a process.
Is there a button that you hit, or is that done with a scissor? And
I actually just go in and hit, I go to the end of each paragraph and hit page break.
Okay.
And so on my Word document, it splits, every paragraph is on its own page.
Yeah.
And then when I'm editing, I just basically randomly pick one. I turn the whole thing red. And then as
you're
I
on the
edit,
computer screen,
I'll hit a Control A, which highlights everything, and turn every piece of text red.
Yeah.
And then as I edit a paragraph, I turn it black.
Okay.
And then you can like look and see which ones you've done and which ones you haven't.
I see. And you'll just kind of jump around yourself.
I try to keep it as random as possible so
Cool.
that each little thing is taken out of its context and
Yeah.
I'm just focusing on the sentences at that point.
Really cool.
And the paragraph.
So you're not going to be changing much from like a, you know, arc or
no,
it's
yeah.
just, you're just
that's supposed to be more early.
Right.
Like,
It's already done.
In the
no more to
bigger
do.
Pictures.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
Hopefully. But
Cool.
I would always end up coming back.
I like these different types of editing. It's like, you know, you get a total different mindset you
For
take
sure.
to it. And each of these is pretty lengthy amount of time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say each one of these cycles would take me about a year.
Yeah.
As it came down, you know. I mean, if I was doing this as my only job,
yeah,
I could maybe do that process in a month.
Yeah.
You know, each
probably
one.
Not. Yeah, right. Oh,
But,
right.
Like each draft.
Go from a year to a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For each
that's
draft.
what you do for 8 hours a day. Yeah.
I think I ended up in total, because after I did the paragraph thing and then the print it and do it and edit by hand, I would then give it to other people to read and try to get feedback.
Yeah.
And then I ended up going through multiple drafts after that.
Yeah. So a lot of editing coming up to this spring in the racquetball court
Sure.
when we spoke, and you're like, I'm going to put it out.
Yeah.
And you didn't.
It goes back to New Year's Eve. I always set goals. I
Cool.
don't call them resolutions because that sounds too like,
right.
You know, people, it's almost a cliche that you never stick with your New Year's resolution. Everyone's broken them by, you know, February 1st.
Yeah.
So I set goals every year for my upcoming year.
Yeah.
And one of them was to publish this or else.
Yeah.
And I think I got to about May or so. I was like, if that's going to happen, I got to get on.
Nothing can happen. Yeah. Gotcha.
So yeah, then I did one more draft cycle going through the entire book and sort of got it to a point where it was as good as I felt like I was willing to put effort into, I guess. Like I could still go through and probably still keep rewriting.
Sure.
I'm sort of a perfectionist, and there's definitely a point where you have to let it go.
Yeah.
You're like, done is better than perfect.
Yeah,
it's never going to be perfect, but if I keep battling with it, it's never going to happen.
Right. Close enough. So this summer you did just the big picture cycle, not the whole scramble paragraphs.
No. Yeah. Just one more.
Gotcha.
From beginning to end.
Yep.
Basically copy editing at that point. No big changes.
Gotcha.
Just making sure the sentences were flowing as well as they could be.
Kind of that like final page editor work that you hire someone to
and trying to make sure there wasn't typos, and there was plenty.
Right.
So
important work, you know, to kind of get it to, you know, I mean, self-publishing, I think, is catching on. It's great. And, you know, the people that can get it to, I mean, if you get the book to be what it would be like if a press had it, by doing this careful work, by having an eye for design and staying in charge and getting the details right.
I mean, we live in an
great
era,
way to go. Yeah.
We live in an era where, I mean, the quality of the print is probably the same as
totally. No, this feels
printing.
nice. Yeah. Got a nice, I forget what this is called, matte, or I don't know, but
exactly.
Like the type. Yeah.
I mean, for sure, it ends up. It's really cool. I guess you would almost think of it as like a democratization of publishing.
Yeah.
Because there are still, with the traditional publishing, there's some gatekeepers, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
A very small group of people controlling what's going out, but self-publishing allows you to kind of put out whatever you want.
Yeah.
But then it is up to you to market, and that's the trick.
They're better at that. But I mean, I feel like some presses, like, maybe you could do just as good self-publishing. That's a whole nother game.
I mean, people that are into self-publishing like to point out that you could go the traditional publishing route, get picked up by an agent and go through a big press. And that does not mean that, like, there's still very few books that sell enough to like make a living.
Oh yeah. Right.
Like, a book is actually considered successful if it sells 5,000 copies.
Yeah.
And an author typically gets about $1 per copy.
Right.
That's $5,000. That is not enough.
Right. That's not why we got into this. Yeah. The bottom line is going to be similar whether you go. It just feels nice to have that press behind you.
It's very, very few books like hit the, 100,000 sales threshold or something like that. Like, those are all big name books at this point.
It's just
a handful of those every year.
Yeah. Getting momentum, writing the next book, right? Continuing writing. That's what putting out a book happens, like feeling good about, this one's out there, this one's done, next one,
Yeah.
and
And honestly, the most important thing, in my opinion, is to have fun.
totally. Yeah.
Like in the end, that's it.
Right. Yeah.
Enjoy the process, because that's ultimately going to be it for you. That's
Yeah.
all you can guarantee yourself.
Right.
Is that you're going to have a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
You're going to have this creative expression. And if people like it, to me, that's like a side benefit almost.
Yeah.
And that's been like the shift for me in how I look at writing fiction, is like just enjoying the process.
Totally.
For sure.
Love that. Paging through, loving the layout. He's got short chapters. Each one has a subtitle, which I really like, kind of organize things. I could see, even though it is lengthy or kind of standard 300-page, 100,000-word book, I could see eating this up, just reading fast.
I tried to keep it the pace. I don't like books that are all action.
Yeah.
In fact, I really admire authors that are able to get a lot of tension without action.
Right. Like that scene. I mean, there's action, but it's very like step by step, right? And it's tense, and we're not seeing like a battle here type of action. Is that what you?
Yeah, for sure. And there is some of that.
Yeah,
definitely.
Good. We want that. Yeah.
I feel like for fantasy, that's you almost have to have, maybe not, but yeah, it seems like that's a big part of the genre, I guess. Sort of like literary fiction is, in my mind, the type of fiction that's not necessarily about action and adventure. It can be slow paced and just intellectually interesting.
Right.
But this book, I wanted to write a fantasy novel, and I think the structure of the novel, because it's two people going on an adventure, sort of a classic hero's journey.
Yeah. Father layout. And daughter.
Except, there's the two of them together instead of it just being one character, I guess. And I don't want to give any spoilers to talk about how it goes for them. But so the format is it's a familiar story, but in a different setting. That was my idea. Yeah. It's not to get weird with both the setting and the arc.
Right.
So it feels familiar, just in a sort of fresh.
The Mayan setting. I mean, this is what an interesting combination. Is there much of this going on in fantasy where it's actually based on like real history of a culture?
Yeah, I think of like Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. As sort of a, it's different for sure, but it's still taking that idea of like their gods and their culture and then kind of, fictionalizing it.
And you did a lot of that too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. You did your homework, on Mayan civilization, culture, got to a level of an expert that you were comfortable with, and then started writing and were able to play around a little bit, going off stuff that is authentic to it. But now, in the fantasy genre, you can get to the fiction opportunities of messing around, making things, that puzzle, kind of making it fit, or just taking a direction that you had a good idea for. May not completely align with Mayan culture, but that's okay.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope it's okay, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such an interesting book for that. And I do want to ask about this because I think it's interesting, and I commend you because I think this could be a route. You're not Mayan.
Yeah.
But you went to the place. You're a fantasy writer. You're a writer who's dedicated. We've been through that as far as just like the love and the care going into the process every step of the way, with it all the way through the editing cycles. You went to Belize. You really had an affinity for the culture, got very interested. You're a student of Mayan culture.
Yeah.
And, just that follow through, or even to begin, I guess for you, it's not all that big a commitment originally, because in 3 months you had a draft done. But now, like with the editing to go through and keep putting the work into, you must have thought, especially going for a big agent, like the alignment of, can a non-Mayan writer put out,
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I feel like even more now than when I first started writing this, there is a push for, if there's going to be a story about a culture, it should be written by a person from that culture.
Yeah.
And it's definitely possible that could be partially why agents were like, nope.
Right. Yep.
And I respect that, and I understand that. And it is a bit of a struggle for me when I think about this, is it actually wrong of me to have taken on a story about a different culture of which I'm not a part of.
Yeah.
And just at the time, that just wasn't even really on my mind.
Right.
I
You were having fun.
I was interested in their culture, and I wanted to write about it.
Yeah.
And while we were visiting some of the archaeological sites, a lot is talked about the kings and the gods, but I was wondering what the life of the regular person was like. So I knew I wanted it to be centered around commoners, I guess, you would say, like some of just the normal people, because it all feels very serious. You visit these sacrificial caves and you visit the pyramids and these palaces, but I imagine that the everyday person, they laughed and they loved and they had music. I don't know, like there's a lot we don't know, because a lot of their homes and their lives were built out of things that did not last, like wood houses, and and so we don't know as much about the commoners as we do about the kings, because they were the ones that chiseled into the rocks and built these giant pyramids that can stand for 1,000 years and things like that. So I was very curious about what the normal person experienced in the Mayan world.
Awesome.
And of some of it, of course, is a guess.
Right. Well, I think fantasy, I think that's a match, where you take this jump, just early on, you happen to be a fantasy writer and you happen to really, go to Belize and be like, oh, this is the fit. I want to write about this. This is going to be fun. But now come these questions of, okay, the follow through. And, I think it's coming from such a good place. And just knowing you, that I commend you for following through. I'm so happy you did, because now here we have a book, and I'm sure, people where this is closer, the subject matter of mine is closer to them, are going to be like, thank you for writing that book. That's my guess, like, thanks for spending all that time thinking about us,
right. And one of the criticisms I've heard of Apocalypto, to bring it up, because it's the reason I bring it up, is one of the few like mainstream movies or fiction, pieces about the ancient Mayans.
They're Mayan, okay.
But some of them were upset by the portrayal, because it sort of makes them look like bloodthirsty, and they were like, hey, what about the aspect of us like praying and like our devotion to our religion? And so I heard that criticism and was like, I want to portray them as being deeply spiritual, deeply committed, serious, passionate people. And so I tried to at least
the Apocalypto example had to help. I'm not going to do it like that, and I'm sure that certainly wasn't made by Mayans. So
well, it was Mel Gibson was the main and he can be sort of a controversial figure in some people's minds anyway.
Going for more action. You can turn up the dial on certain aspects of things, in the arts, and for you to go more to the regular person and what life was like. And I think that's so cool, kind of filling in a gap, taking your best guess. And thank you for answering that. I think that's great. And I think, we got a great book because of your follow through and you sitting with those questions so much and just being, you know what? No, I'm going to put this out,
Yeah.
I think I brought this author up to you, Tony Hillerman, because I had gone to, so he's a great example because he writes a lot about Navajos, he's a white writer, but has many Navajo friends. And I'm still reading last night. I'm still reading this guy. Like, I got a lot of his books, and they're, mysteries, they're fast, and he's great. Just such a lot of Navajo knowledge and culture. And his two main characters are Navajo, like, a detective or kind of retired, private eye kind of guys, that's like the scene, a lot of like nice series like that. And he's great. And I'd read some about him as I got into the novels, and just hearing that like Navajos really are really happy that these books are out, and they like reading them, and they've thanked him. He has friends, of course, like, I don't know if you have many Mayan friends yet, but but they've said, like, that they're just happy in the way they're portrayed, like they're the hero, and it's just great to have more about them. So I think if you're adding, I think that's a good example too, to just feel good. And I know you do, but it's just, I think it's an interesting point here with this particular work. Another reason why this book is unique, which I think is always great for art and for the literary arts, to put out something original and new. And like, this is a whole new idea. I'm going to chase it.
I would hope that if nothing else, someone might read it who had no experience with Mayan culture, and their curiosity would be sparked.
Totally.
for them to dive in for themselves and learn about it. And in that way, it could be a positive thing, even if I wasn't 100% accurate with some of the details. They might dive in and be like, oh, you portrayed the ball game incorrectly.
Yeah.
Which I know I did.
There's a ball game?
Yeah.
Nice.
So
yeah, that sounds very cool.
In Mesoamerican cultures, they all, not just the Mayans, but all of them in that region and that time period had what's called the sacred ball game. And it was very important to their culture. And of course, if I was going to write this book, there has to be a ball game scene.
Yeah.
And the way I portrayed it, and they think that there was, and again, they don't totally know 100% all the different versions of the game that might have been played.
Yeah.
But I portrayed it as very soccer-like.
Okay. I was going to say football, baseball.
When I sort of did
cricket,
some other deeper research, some of which even came out after I had already gotten well into the draft. Like they've learned more and more. They're still learning, still finding new cities that are buried in the jungle.
Cool.
I guess people have actually found cities by looking at Google Earth. Like even laymen, like just normal non-scientists will go on Google Earth and scan through the jungle and they'll say, oh, there's like this very square looking shape here. But anyway,
that's interesting.
I've since learned back to my original point. That the way the ball game, like even the shape of the courts, I didn't portray very accurately.
I think you're going to be fine. If it'd be like, where's the ball game? Then, but you have enough knowledge. Like, I got to have a ball game, and I'm going to do my best. And maybe there are variations throughout these. You in the start of the show, you talked about how many different Mayan cities and cultures. Like, there's variation. I think we probably hit one of those.
Yeah. And there's even a couple times in the book where I tried to address potential critics by one of the characters saying things like that. Oh, there's many different cultures and they've had different versions of this story.
Crafty.
Or this
I like
this game. Because a lot of the story is actually framed around one of their most important creation myths, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
It's right out of their holy book.
Yeah.
And I use that as sort of, I guess, a foil for the way parts of the plot come out. So I actually retell that myth, and I read many versions of it. Yeah, because there are a lot of variations even in what exists. Yeah, and the other sad thing, I was talking to my wife about this morning, is there was probably many other versions of all these stories that were lost when they had contact with Western civilization, which happened in the 1500s, I believe. And at the time, I believe it was the Spaniards that first had contact with the ancient Mayans. They wanted to spread Christianity. And so texts that didn't align with what they were the message they were trying to spread, they often destroyed. And it's impossible to know what might have existed. And some of what we know about the ancient Mayans is from the very few surviving texts. And so maybe there were different versions of.
Right. I think that helps your whole play here too. Right. I think people are going to be going to Belize and going to the cave and just. I'm interested.
Amazing cave. Excited. If you do ever go to Belize,
you got to do that.
ATM cave, unbelievable.
So can you just swim to that from shore? You got to take a boat out, or?
It's actually it's like a creek that comes out of the cave and it has a big pool in front of it. So to get into the cave, you have to swim through this pool.
Okay, so we're not on the ocean; we're at like a river.
It's in the middle of the jungle.
Oh, awesome!
I guess a friend of mine told me that they recently went to Belize and they might have closed it. I don't know if temporarily or permanently. Okay. Closed it to visitation.
Good to put out there.
But I mean, it has a Wikipedia page. It's famous enough of a cave. I think Nat Geo listed it as like the #1 sacred cave in the world or something like that. And at the very end, you climb up this pretty steep wall and there's a very well preserved skeleton of one of the sacrifice victims, I guess.
Wow.
And it was this really powerful moment to me to stand there and look at this. And I loved our guide because he always said, that's a person. He didn't say that's bones or whatever. He was like, this is a person. Right. And like something about the way he said that, like we'd be going around, they make you take your shoes off because you're less likely to step on stuff and break it. But he would always say, watch out, there's a person there, because you'd be passing these remains. And for me, that really kind of like helped it feel serious in the way that I felt it should be. Because you are in someone's grave. Like this is a, you know, this is a very sacred place, and it's a powerful place. And anyway, so we climbed up, and this, you know, Mayan sacrifice victim is laying there, and he was, I guess it was a he. Almost all sacrifice victims were male. Like we have this idea that, you know, we sacrifice women, virgins, or whatever, but usually they were males, probably captured in battle from rivals. And this person was laid out in a very specific pose they called dance pose. So they were like sort of arranged on the ground and had been laying there for 1,000 years. And you're standing there and you're like, that person, you know, 1,000 years ago had this sacrifice, and there they are. Just it was intense for sure. And
there's no like museum glass casing like set up to it's just
sitting there. It's just laying there.
It's been preserved somehow. Wow. Heavy.
Just really, really amazing. For sure.
Well, if the ATM cave is closed, you can go to some of the other sites that are featured in the Sword of Ishel, Book 1, Broken Pyramids. Dude, I could go all day. We're up to, I mean, it's just, you know, school pickup. We're live on 91.7 KIBH FM Seward with Brian Wright talking about his book, The Sword of Ishel, Book 1, Pyramids, a fantasy novel set in Mayan culture.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on, Sean. And it's been great to
It's been awesome talking to you. Yeah, we could go on and on. Did you want to read a little more? Are you feeling good with that? I mean, I like the excerpt you threw out there, but
we could leave it at that. That was the first chapter. It's a good introduction. I have that chapter posted on my website. I might publish the second chapter as well, just to get people you know, that are interested in read the first couple chapters and see if they want to tackle more.
That's a good move. Your website is your name,
BrianDonaldWright.com.
Yep. And then there's a link to buy the book. But to buy the book, you could go to Dreamland Books right now and you know, get it sold out real quick and get Brian with the restock. Or you could go to Amazon, and that'll work too. And it's all going to support Brian and reading his work. And as you read this new novels, I will be sure to let them know what you think. And you know, like you have that opportunity as you know, being among these authors in Seward where you see them. If you read it, you know, it really feels good to just hear that you read it and that you got entertainment out of it. So let them know.
Yeah, and if you want to leave an honest review on Amazon, you know, that
totally. No, those are big. Yeah,
if you're gonna leave a 2-star review, maybe, you know,
just come up and tell them that. Yeah,
honest review for sure. That's what I tell people.
People are going to like this. I mean, the sentence level. I mean, I love, you know, fantasy novel. I haven't done a lot of fantasy, but I mean, what you read felt like literature, you know, just by the crafted sentences. And, you know, you went through all your editing cycles and the work that went in. And I as you said, I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, cause that's in the sentences that you read. Like they are carved in stone.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I did go to school. I got a creative writing degree.
No, I know. Yeah.
And at the time I definitely, you know, I was in my 20s and
big dreams.
I thought I was, you know, I remember even going around being like, my goal is to win the Pulitzer Prize. I mean, come on, that was lofty.
Dream big.
But I wanted to be a literary writer.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, I realized that genre fiction, I guess, fantasy writing was more fun for me. But
yeah, I like that fun. That's a great note that you had. You know, I think that's a great message to take from this, like the fun of writing. And, you know, that's, you know, I would go to like, is this worthwhile? You know, I often go to like with writing when I'm just kind of like, well, it's fun. Like sometimes, but I think just it is because it's fun.
Yeah,
like the hobby of it, the pastime, the the just way your brain works, like to always, when you're not at the desk, to be running around with it and be making connections and sharing it with people. It's enriching on many levels.
Absolutely.
It just makes a well-rounded person. Time you do need, but we got that in Seward. Winter's coming, and it's writing time, publishing time for Brian Wright.
Publishing time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for listening live on 91.7 KIBH FM Seward, back on the radio. Really fun. And on our YouTube channel, please subscribe to our @Sacktown channel. Drop a comment there, a like, help support us. And Brian, awesome show. Thank you so much. I look forward to talking more because I know so much now, and I'm going to read it. And we got a lot of good conversations ahead.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks again for having me. It was great.
Yeah. Great job, man.